In the early 90s, the Batman comics started to prioritize the continuity of the stories, and they started to expand the mythology of the Batman universe. This was a conscious effort that started in 1992 with the introduction of a new creative team for Detective Comics. Writer Chuck Dixon and artist Tom Lyle started their run in Detective Comics 644, and they developed many elements, concepts, and created new characters for the Batman stories. The cast of the GCPD was expanded when they brought back Harvey Bullock and also introduced Renee Montoya. Commissioner Gordon and his fiancée Sarah Essen also became important players in the new stories, while the dynamics of Batman and Robin became the central part of the series. Chuck Dixon continued to expand the mythology of the Bat, reintroducing old characters and creating new ones. This is the story of how the Cluemaster and the Huntress became part of the modern Batman mythos, and also the first appearance of a spoiler. Before checking that, however, there is a side story that we need to take a look at. It is called Eclipso, The Darkness Within, a massive crossover event that involved all the major DC titles at the time, including the Batman comics. The Batman chapters of this crossover take place in the Batman, Detective Comics, and Robin annuals of 1992. The first chapter is Detective Comics Annual number 5. It features the first appearance of Barbara Gordon in a Batman book in over 2 years, and the first meeting of the Joker and the Ventriloquist. The second chapter is the first Robin annual, where Tim Drake has to deal with anarchy. The great thing about this one is that it showcases Robin as a solo hero, as well as a team player when he works with anarchy to stop a bigger threat. The third and final chapter is the Batman Annual number 16. As a result of the Eclipso crossover, Joker is able to transform into a monster Joker using some dark crystals known as the Heart of Darkness. These crystals contain the essence of Eclipso, and the Joker uses them to become a super monster. Batman is powerless against such an unstoppable force, and the only way he can stand against that is to become a monster Batman. The Dark Knight uses one of the crystals to become a powerful beast, and the two monsters fight all night until daylight comes and removes their power. This last chapter of the crossover is very reminiscent of the ending of the video game Batman Arkham Asylum. The similarities include the Joker's hideout, where he sits on a high throne surrounded by tools of torture, the Joker's character design, which is very thin and grotesque, and the idea of Joker becoming a monster in the climax of the story. The main difference is that in this one, Batman also becomes a monster in order to stop the Joker. The artist on this last chapter was Vince Giarano, and I think he's the most effective artist of all 3 chapters. His art is very sharp, dynamic, and stylish. The writers of all 3 chapters were Alan Grant and John Wagner, and even though it is not a very groundbreaking storyline, this crossover showcased the allies and enemies of Batman, which is the general tone of the following stories. Detective Comics 647 features the return of an old, forgotten villain, the Cluemaster. His first appearance was in Detective Comics 351. He was created by Gardner Fox and Carmine Infantino at the height of the Batmania in the 1960s. The Cluemaster was another one of several costumed criminals that were created in the 60s as a result of the hugely popular Batman TV series. The gimmick of the Cluemaster was that he left clues for Batman to solve his crimes and stop him. Basically, Cluemaster was a bad imitation of the Riddler. He was a minor villain whose real name was not even revealed back then, and who didn't really make any more relevant appearances in the Batman comics. That is, until now. In this story, Chuck Dixon and Tom Lyle bring back this long-forgotten character. They cured him of his compulsion of leaving clues, and they also reveal his real name, Arthur Brown. Arthur becomes the leader of a gang and comes up with the biggest criminal heist in Gotham. However, someone else is leaving clues about his crimes, and that someone is none other than his own daughter. Detective Comics 647 is the first appearance of Stephanie Brown. She is the daughter of Arthur Brown and she hates her father. All she wants is to put an end to the Cluemaster's criminal career, and in order to do so, Stephanie becomes the Spoiler. She keeps a close eye on her father's activities and she sends clues to the police and Batman so that they can stop him. Eventually, her identity is uncovered by Robin, who finds out her connections to Arthur Brown. In the end, Batman and Robin capture the Cluemaster with a little extra help from Spoiler. This three-part storyline is Spoiler's first adventure, the first of many more to come over the years. The remarkable thing about this story is how organic the introduction of a new character is. It doesn't feel forced, and by the end of it, you really want to know more about Stephanie and her alter ego. It is also important to notice that this storyline introduced Armand Kroll, the man who will become the next mayor of Gotham. This was also the last story illustrated by Tom Lyle. Starting in the next issue, the art was done by the one and only Graham Nolan. Detective Comics 650 is the first Batman collaboration between Chuck Dixon and Graham Nolan. This issue features Harold as he explores the unknown parts of the Batcave. He goes deep into the darkest depths of the place, and he finds out that the Batcave has a connection with the subway system of Gotham. This is a major example of how they started to focus on the other characters that surround Batman. This trend continued in Detective Comics 651, which features a story called A Bullet for Bullock. This is a classic mystery story. Someone wants to kill Harvey Bullock, and he has to find out who is it, with help from Batman. This story is such a classic noir tale that it was adapted years later into an episode of the second season of Batman the Animated Series. A Bullet for Bullock is also the first time that we get to see Batman illustrated by Graham Nolan, who in my opinion is one of the most effective Batman artists of all time. And speaking of Batman artists, this issue also marks the first Detective Comics cover, illustrated by Kelly Jones. And finally, the return of the Huntress to the Batman mythos. The original Huntress was the daughter of Batman and Catwoman of Earth 2. Her name was Helena Wayne, and she followed her father's footsteps as the vigilante known as Huntress. However, after the continuity was wiped out in 1986, Huntress became a completely different person. Helena Bertinelli was the daughter of a notorious mobster. She grew up in an environment of violence and aggression, and as an adult she wanted to separate herself from her family's business by becoming the Huntress. The character didn't make any appearances in the Batman comics at all, and all she had was a short-lived ongoing series that started in 1989 and ended only 1 year later. In that series, Huntress worked with Batman when the Dark Knight chased a wanted criminal all the way to New York City, which was the base of operation of the new Huntress. That was the only time Huntress and Batman interacted, and after that series ended, Huntress virtually disappeared from the DC universe. Detective Comics 652 and 653 feature the return of Huntress, and this time as a resident of Gotham City. Helena Bertinelli had abandoned her vigilante activities for a while, but she goes back into action to stop some foreign terrorists. The story features Batman trying to stop Huntress, and then the two of them working together to stop the criminals. It is an interesting tale that shows the difference between Batman and Huntress. Although their origin stories are both connected by tragic pasts, Batman refuses to kill criminals, while Huntress is willing to let them die. The story also shows that Batman doesn't want Robin to be involved with the Huntress, as she might prove to be a bad example for him, which is ironic considering the future history of both Robin and Huntress together. And that's the beauty of this specific era in Detective Comics. Chuck Dixon expanded the Batman universe by introducing all these new players and developing them so that they become more than secondary characters. The Spoiler, Armand Kroll, Harvey Bullock, Harold, the Subway Connection and the Huntress are all very important for the upcoming Batman stories, and Chuck Dixon was only preparing the stage for what was to come. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I would like you to join me in the road to the most iconic Batman storyline of all time. All you have to do is subscribe to the channel, and you will be part of the crazy journey that is about to begin. And if you want to stay updated on the upcoming videos, make sure to follow me on Twitter at Salazar. Until the next time, always remember to be safe out there.